Stop. Whatever you are doing right now, stop. Because what just happened in the NFL is not normal. This is not your typical off-season reshuffling. This is not teams making quiet, calculated adjustments. What we just witnessed was a full-blown earthquake, a violent, chaotic, jaw-dropping explosion of moves, money, and madness that has completely redrawn the map of professional football. Franchise players who spent their entire careers with one team are now wearing different colors. A quarterback who was paid like a franchise cornerstone just got cut and signed somewhere else for basically nothing. A trade that was supposed to be one of the biggest in NFL history collapsed at the last second for medical reasons, in a moment that one league veteran said he had never seen in 30 years in this business. There are players who were expected to get $20 million a year who ended up signing for less than half that. And there is one legendary quarterback still sitting out there and signed, silent, waiting, and the entire league cannot stop talking about him. This offseason did not just shake things up. It detonated. And we are going to walk through every single explosion, one by one, until you fully understand just how different the NFL looks right now compared to 3 months ago. To really feel the weight of what this 2026 NFL free agency period meant, you have to understand what the league looked like going into it. The Seattle Seahawks had just won the Super Bowl. Kenneth Walker III had just been named Super Bowl MVP after destroying the New England Patriots on the biggest stage in football. The Kansas City Chiefs dynasty, a dynasty that had defined an era of NFL football, had officially been knocked off its throne. And in the wake of that seismic championship result, 31 other franchises were staring at their rosters, staring at their salary caps, and asking themselves one terrifying question: what do we have to do to get there? The answer, for many of them, was everything. Spend everything. Risk everything. Move everyone. And that is exactly what they did. The chaos started before free agency even officially opened. The legal tampering window, those few days when teams can negotiate with players but not yet officially sign them, has always been a pressure cooker. But the 2026 version of that window was something nobody in league circles had seen before. The phones were ringing off the hook before the sun came up on the first day. Agents were fielding calls from 4 teams simultaneously. General managers were making decisions in real time that would define their franchises for the next 3 to 5 years. And at the center of all of it, sitting like the eye of a hurricane, was a trade that everyone in the NFL was watching. A blockbuster agreement between the Baltimore Ravens and the Las Vegas Raiders that would have sent pass rusher Max Crosby to Baltimore in exchange for 2 first-round picks. The Ravens shocked the football world when, for medical reasons, they pulled out of the blockbuster trade agreement to acquire Max Crosby from the Raiders. Think about what that means. This was not a trade that fell apart over money. This was not a disagreement about draft compensation. The Ravens had agreed to the deal. The Raiders had agreed to the deal. Everyone had shaken hands, figuratively speaking. And then the medical evaluation came back, and Baltimore walked away. The league's instant reaction to the news was frustration with the Ravens, and the Crosby deal changed the nature of free agency not just for the Raiders and Ravens, but for all interested teams. Teams that had been holding back, waiting to see if Crosby moved, suddenly had to recalibrate their entire offseason strategy in a matter of hours. Front offices that had been counting on the Crosby domino to fall before making their own moves were left scrambling. One veteran league executive said he had never seen a trade of this magnitude fall through in 30 years in the NFL. Not in 3 decades. 30 years of watching this league, and nothing like this had ever happened at this scale. NFL +2. But here is where the story gets even more fascinating. Because the Raiders, rather than collapsing under the weight of that collapsed deal, responded by going on one of the most aggressive and shocking spending sprees in NFL free agency history. With over $100 million in cap space and a roster that desperately needed rebuilding around their incoming rookie quarterback, Las Vegas came out swinging. The Raiders signed center Tyler Linderbaum to a 3-year, $81 million deal, $27 million per year, which was 50% higher than the previous highest-paid center in NFL history. The football world lost its mind. Analysts, former players, coaches, fans, everyone had an opinion. Because $27 million per year for a center is not just a contract. It is a statement. It is a franchise saying, loudly and without apology, that they believe the foundation of a championship team is built in the trenches, and they are willing to pay historic money to prove it. ESPN's Ben Solak coined the term the Linderbaum leap to describe the proportional impact of that contract, calculating that to match the same market reset at other positions, a team would have to pay an edge rusher $70 million per year or a running back over $30 million. That is how seismic the Linderbaum deal was. It did not just reset the center market. It redefined what aggressive spending looks like in the NFL. And the Raiders did not stop there. They added linebacker Quay Walker, linebacker Nakobe Dean, defensive end Kwity Paye, and nickelback Taron Johnson in rapid succession. Multiple NFL experts named the Raiders the most improved team of free agency, noting they had filled massive holes with proven players across multiple positions. The narrative around Las Vegas had been one of dysfunction, instability, and losing for years. Suddenly, in the span of 1 week, the Raiders looked like a team with a plan. Not just a plan, a vision. And with Fernando Mendoza widely expected to go to them as the #1 overall pick in the draft, the pieces were being assembled around a franchise quarterback with a speed and intentionality that no one in the league had anticipated. ESPN. While the Raiders were rewriting history with their checkbook, the emotional story of free agency was being written somewhere else entirely. In Tampa Bay. Because after 12 seasons, Mike Evans was gone. After more than a decade in Tampa, Evans signed with the San Francisco 49ers, giving the NFL a sight that almost nobody thought they would ever see. Evans had been the heartbeat of that franchise. He had been there before Tom Brady arrived and transformed the Buccaneers into Super Bowl champions. He had been there through the championships and the rebuilding and everything in between. He was Tampa Bay, and now he was in San Francisco, suiting up alongside Brock Purdy, preparing to give the 49ers the legitimate #1 receiver they had been desperately searching for. San Francisco had been in dire need of receiver help after losing the disgruntled Brandon Ayuk, watching Jawan Jennings walk in free agency, and getting only 9 appearances from former first-round pick Ricky Pearsall over 2 seasons. The Evans signing filled a hole, yes. But more than that, it sent a message. The 49ers were not done. They were not in rebuild mode. They were still competing, still aggressive, still believing they could make a championship run, even with George Kittle recovering from an Achilles injury that would keep him out until at least midseason. Sports Illustrated NFL. The reaction in Tampa was devastating for fans. The reaction in San Francisco was euphoric confusion, the kind of excitement mixed with disbelief that only comes when your team signs someone you genuinely thought was impossible to acquire. And the reaction around the NFL was quiet acknowledgement that free agency had truly entered a new era. Nobody was untouchable anymore. No player was permanently attached to any jersey. The market was open, the money was flowing, and loyalties, while still respected, were ultimately secondary to opportunity. Then came the quarterback carousel, and if you thought the Evans news was emotional, the quarterback moves turned the temperature up to an entirely different level. Kyler Murray, the 2019 #1 overall pick, the man Arizona had invested a franchise-altering contract in, the player who was supposed to be the face of the Cardinals for the next decade, was released. Murray had suffered a foot injury in Week 5 of the 2025 season, was eventually placed on injured reserve, and once he was eligible to return, the Cardinals announced he would not play the rest of the year. The relationship between Murray and the organization had deteriorated beyond the point of repair. The frustration on both sides had been building for months. And when the Cardinals finally made the move official, the NFL world reacted with a mixture of shock and, frankly, relief that the long-running dysfunction was finally over. ESPN. But the truly extraordinary part of the Murray story was not that he was released. It was where he ended up and what it cost to get him. The Minnesota Vikings pounced on Murray's availability following his surprise release from Arizona, signing him to a budget 1-year deal for just $1.3 million. $1.3 million. For a former #1 overall pick. For a player who, when healthy, is one of the most electric and difficult-to-defend quarterbacks in the entire league. Because Murray still had $36.8 million fully guaranteed remaining on his Cardinals contract, Arizona was on the hook for the majority of his salary, meaning Minnesota got a potentially franchise-altering quarterback for almost nothing. The reaction from the rest of the league was visceral. Every fan base whose team had needed a quarterback upgrade looked at that deal and felt a unique combination of envy and fury. How is this possible? How does a market that can pay Tyler Linderbaum $27 million a year produce a situation where a former #1 pick is available for the veteran minimum? Bleacher Report ESPN. Some analysts immediately declared the end of J.J. McCarthy's era as a Vikings starter, pointing out that Minnesota's biggest mistake the previous offseason had been allowing both Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones to walk without adding any proven depth. Others pushed back, arguing that Murray was arriving at a low point in his career and that McCarthy, with another full offseason of development under his belt, still had every right to compete for the starting job. The debate was loud, passionate, and completely unresolved, which is exactly what the NFL lives for. What everyone agreed on, however, was that if Murray could return to even 80% of his peak form under a coaching staff willing to unleash his athleticism, the Vikings would become one of the most dangerous and unpredictable offenses in the entire NFC. Bleacher Report. The pass rusher market, meanwhile, went absolutely nuclear, and it started with one signing that blew every projection out of the water. Jaelan Phillips, a player who had managed just 5 sacks in 2025 and had appeared in only 13 of a possible 34 games over the previous 2 seasons due to injuries, signed a 4-year, $120 million contract with the Carolina Panthers. $120 million. $30 million per year. For a pass rusher whose career high in sacks came as a rookie, the reaction was immediate and divided. Half the football world applauded the Panthers for their aggression, for refusing to accept mediocrity, for backing up the truck to land one of the few genuine edge rushers on the market. The other half called it reckless, the kind of desperate move that teams make when they have been bad for too long and can no longer stomach being patient. Phillips himself responded to the criticism with confidence and defiance, telling reporters, "Just turning all that disruption into production, that's the next step of my career. At the bare minimum, I'm a disruptive force." Whether that self-belief translates into sacks and wins in Carolina remains to be seen. But the contract was signed, the money was guaranteed, and the Panthers had drawn a line in the sand. Bleacher Report. Bleacher Report. The Phillips deal immediately sent the rest of the edge rusher market into a frenzy. After his contract came through, Odafe Oweh signed a 4-year, $100 million deal with the Washington Commanders, and Boy Mafe left Seattle to join the Bengals on a 3-year, $60 million contract. Every domino fell harder than the last. ESPN's projections had Oweh going for $19 million per year. He got $25 million. Mafe was projected around $16 million annually. He got $20 million. The edge rusher market did not just reset. It exploded, and teams that needed pass rushers found themselves paying prices that would have seemed absurd even 2 years ago. Esp. The Cincinnati Bengals were one of those teams, and their situation carried more emotional weight than most. The Bengals entered the 2026 offseason desperate to upgrade a pass rush that had managed just 35 sacks in 2025, and that desperation was intensified by the fact that Trey Hendrickson was not coming back. Hendrickson, a player who had been one of the most dominant pass rushers in the league during his time in Cincinnati, had spent the entire previous offseason in a contract dispute that never got resolved. The relationship had broken down publicly. The frustration had spilled into the media. And when free agency opened, Hendrickson made his decision. He signed with the Baltimore Ravens, the Bengals' most hated division rival. The reaction in Cincinnati was nothing short of volcanic. Fans who had watched Hendrickson give everything for that team, watched him go to Pro Bowls in a Bengals uniform, watched him be the engine of their defense. Those fans now had to watch him suit up for Baltimore. It was the kind of move that does not just sting, it burns. Bleacher Report. ESPN. The Pittsburgh Steelers, for their part, decided that this was the year to stop being timid. Multiple experts singled out the Steelers as one of the biggest winners of free agency, noting that landing Michael Pittman Jr. from the Colts and signing him to a 3-year, $59 million extension finally gave DK Metcalf a legitimate running mate at receiver. Pittsburgh had been the league's great mystery for years, a team with a legendary history, a passionate fan base, a defensive identity, but an offense that consistently failed to put enough weapons around its quarterbacks. That era appeared to be over. The Steelers were spending. The Steelers were aggressive. The Steelers were building something that looked, for the first time in a long time, like a genuine contender rather than a team simply hoping to survive each season on toughness alone. The only question, the always present, never resolved Steelers question, was at quarterback. And that question remained deeply, frustratingly open. ESPN. The Atlanta Falcons made a move that was either inspired or insane, depending on who you asked. Tua Tagovailoa, a player whose career had been defined as much by concussions and missed games as by his undeniable talent, landed in Atlanta. Despite all his struggles, Tua had led the league in completion rate, passing yards in 2023, and touchdown rate in 2022, and he arrived in Atlanta sporting an NFL best 69.9 completion percentage since 2023 and a winning record as a starter. The Falcons grabbed him on a low-cost deal, essentially betting that a change of scenery and a new coaching staff could unlock the version of Tua that the NFL had seen flashes of, but never consistently. Analysts noted that publicly, at least, the Falcons still appeared to have faith in second-year quarterback Michael Penix Jr., who, despite a difficult 2025 season, had thrown double the touchdowns as interceptions and had led the league with the lowest interception rate. So Atlanta entered the offseason with a genuine quarterback competition, 2 players, 2 stories, 2 futures, competing for one starting job in a city that has been waiting for its football team to deliver for a very long time. NFL Bleacher Report. And then, quietly, something happened in Green Bay that nobody was prepared for. The Packers, a franchise with one of the most storied histories in all of professional sports, had a free agency period so underwhelming, so passive, that one anonymous NFL executive admitted to reporters, "I'm a little worried about them. They lost a ton on defense in free agency. I'd be worried about the corner position." This was not a random voice. This was someone inside the league, someone who watches film, someone who knows what these rosters look like up close. And they were publicly worried about Green Bay. The Packers had traded away their first-round picks for the next 2 years to land Micah Parsons. They had made minimal moves in free agency. They were betting everything on internal development, on Jordan Love taking a massive leap, on Matthew Golden and Christian Watson becoming genuine stars, on a defense that had been gutted by free agency departures somehow holding together. Whether that bet pays off will be one of the most fascinating subplots of the entire 2026 NFL season. Bleacher Report. And through all of it, the trades, the signings, the market resets, the heartbreaks, the celebrations, the controversies, one name kept surfacing in every conversation. One name that refused to go away no matter how many contracts were announced or deals were agreed upon. Aaron Rodgers. Even as free agency moved at a relentless pace and players across the league found new homes, Rodgers remained unsigned. Teams were mentioned. Rumors circulated. Connections were made and then denied. But Rodgers stayed silent. No announcement. No press conference. No jersey reveal. Just silence. And in the NFL, silence from Aaron Rodgers is louder than a stadium full of screaming fans. Because everyone knows that wherever Rodgers lands, whatever team gets him, the entire league will have to recalibrate. He is not just a quarterback. He is gravity. And right now, he is gravitational force without a destination. Fox Sports. What this 2026 NFL free agency period ultimately revealed, beyond the contracts, beyond the individual stories, beyond even the staggering amounts of money, was something deeper about the soul of the league itself. It revealed that patience is gone. The era of sitting back and building slowly through the draft, of waiting for the right moment, of playing it safe, that era is over for most franchises. The teams that won this offseason were the teams that acted with urgency, with aggression, with a willingness to be wrong in the pursuit of being great. The Raiders spent over $100 million in a week. The Panthers guaranteed $120 million to a pass rusher with 5 sacks last season. The Vikings signed a franchise quarterback for less than the cost of a practice squad player at a different position. These are not normal moves. These are desperate, bold, violent swings at a moving target called a championship. And that is what makes the NFL impossible to look away from. That is what brings you back every single year, every single offseason, every single time a notification pops up on your phone at 2 in the morning saying a star player just changed teams. Because in this league, nothing is permanent. Nothing is safe. Nobody is untouchable. The ground is always shifting. And somewhere out there right now, Aaron Rodgers is thinking about where he wants to play. And when that answer finally comes, the ground is going to shift again. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over.